So, I don't do videos all that often anymore, and I decided to show you guys why. I've been playing my DS non-stop because of one series.
Gotta catch 'em all! Gotta catch 'em all! Pokemon!
First, I'll review each of the DS games, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that you can do, such as competition, play, breeding, all that kind of stuff, after you've beaten the Elite Four in each of the games. And hopefully by the end of this video, you'll see why I love this series so much. There are technically 7 main series titles for the DS, but really, it's more like 3, because whenever they release these games, they come in 2 flavors, each representing the mascot legendary of that particular release. But I'll get more into that with each title. Now I'm going to do this review in the order I believe the game should be played. I didn't play them this way myself. My first game was actually Pokemon White. The order they should be played in my opinion, is chronological. So, onto the first game, Heart Gold and Soul Silver. These games are actually remakes of the second Pokemon games, which were originally released on the Game Boy Color. For those of you who have never played a Pokemon game before, the basic idea is to travel around the region collecting Pokemon and using them to battle other trainers and gyms. Each region has 8 gyms, and after you beat them all and earn their badges, you can enter into the league where you have to face the Elite Four and finally, the champion. Each title in the series has its own unique features, but basic gameplay remains the same from title to title. Heart Gold Soul Silver is unique in that it is the only game to include 2 regions. Once you complete Johto region, where you start the game off, you can travel to the Kanto region, which is where the first game in the Pokemon series took place. There you can battle 8 more gyms and even face off against the protagonist of the first game, Red. You can also catch the Pokemon and legendaries from the first game. This easily makes Heart Gold Soul Silver the largest of all Pokemon games. This game has one unique feature I really wish was in all of the games. The Pokemon that is the first slot of your party can actually be seen and walks around with you. You can interact with it, and sometimes it will find items when you do so. It doesn't sound like much of a feature, but I find that it makes you grow more attached to your Pokemon, and I don't know, it's just kind of fun being able to see the little guy follow you around and shit. The only other Pokemon game that does this is Pokemon Yellow for the Game Boy, and that was sort of like an enhanced version of the first game in the series. Another feature is the Pokewalker. This is a tiny like Tamagotchi device that comes included with the game. You can put a Pokemon into it and keep it in your pocket when you're not playing, and it will count the steps you take. It's a pedometer. These are then converted into EXP for the Pokemon inside of it, and there's also some mini games in a form of currency that can be earned and used to capture Pokemon within the mini games. I didn't really use the device at all, it's not really my thing, but I could see how some people would enjoy this added feature. One other thing I wish was in all the games, but for some reason only exists in this title, is the ability to toggle run mode. In the other games you have to hold down the B button to run. It's not a huge deal, but it's nice to have the toggle, nonetheless. Because mostly when I play, I don't actually use the bike, which is kind of like the mount of the game. It goes a little too fast sometimes, but so I just like to run myself. Unlike all the other Pokemon games that have 2 versions, in this one you can actually acquire the mascot legendary of the opposite title. The only legendaries that are unique to the games are Kyogre for the Heart Gold and Groudon for Soul Silver. In my opinion, Groudon is better, so I recommend you get Soul Silver. Overall, I would have to say that this game gave me the most enjoyment out of all the other titles, but it isn't without flaws. Being that this is a remake of an old Game Boy Color game, it seriously lacks story. I had played White before this one, and that game has a pretty good story, so it was a bit shocking to have pretty much no story at all. The gameplay is excellent, however, and simply exploring the world, seeing new Pokemon, and battling the gyms really is enough to float you through all of it. I highly recommend that you get this game and have this be the first introduction to the Pokemon series that you do. Yeah, it's awesome. It kicks ass. Just get it. The next in the set of games are actually the ones that were the first to release on the DS, and are the 4th generation. Now the 3 pictured here are all the same game, basically. Diamond and Pearl were the first to come out, and then later a sort of director's cut, remake, enhanced version called Platinum came out. That is the version I have, and I recommend it as it's the same game with improvements such as the versus recorder, which I will talk about later in the video, and some multiplayer mini-games. So as I said earlier, all the games follow the same basic progression. This one, however, does have a storyline, albeit a rather simple one. I'm not going to get into that as it would be spoilers. Some of the unique features of this game include an underground mining minigame that allows you to find fossils that you can turn into Pokemon. Other players nearby can join in the underground via Wi-Fi and try to beat you to the mining nodes by setting up traps for one another to get stuck in. Like the Pokewalker, I didn't really use this that much, but it's a neat feature that's there for you to check out. This game has some pretty nice legendaries as well. The mascot, Giratina, is a beast, and he has multiple forms. And if you can get the event item called the Azure Flute, you can get the strongest Pokemon that currently exists, Arceus. He's kind of unique in that he changes forms depending on what item he's holding. Admittedly, I spent the least amount of time with this game. I pretty much just beat the Elite Four and caught all the legendaries that I could. Now, that may seem like I'm making this out to be a bad game, but it really isn't. I had a blast playing through it. A word of caution, however. When I played Platinum, it was right after Soul Silver, and since both games are Generation 4 games, I bred myself a dream team of Pokemon and transferred the eggs to my character in Platinum as soon as I got to the first Poké Center. This was a mistake that detracted from the game. You see, part of the experience of these games is coming into a new area, catching the Pokemon, seeing if you like how they play, and picking and choosing your team along the way. By doing what I did, I bypassed that and just annihilated everything in my path with my balanced and highly resistant team. It took away the challenge of having to adapt to each gym, so I recommend that you do not do this. If you do follow my review and pick up Soul Silver first, then you will certainly know by now whether or not you like the series. If you do, you should definitely pick up this title next. Lastly, we have Pokemon Black and White, the latest in the series and the first Generation 5 title. The developers chose to do some pretty radical changes in this title, such as not including any Pokemon from prior games in this region. The only way to get those is to first beat the game, and then use the Poké Transfer to migrate them from Gen 4 games, or to have them traded to you by a friend who already has them in their Black or White game. This caused a few fans to be upset, but I personally didn't mind at all. mainly because this was the first game I played in the series. After having played all the others, I think it was a good decision. Another big change in the series that they made, which I also like, is to the way technical machines work. These are items you get that allow you to teach your Pokemon specific moves that they may not be able to normally learn. Prior to this game, they were consumable and would be gone after using them, making their supply limited. In fact, most of them could only be obtained and used once unless a cheating device is used. In Black and White, however, once you acquire the TM, it can be used indefinitely, which kicks ass. Graphically, there is a noticeable improvement as well. The games have many more 3D elements, and move effects look a lot nicer as well. They have also added 2 new modes of battle: triple battles, in which you use 3 Pokemon at a time, and rotation battles, which you use 3 Pokemon also, but only 1 moves per turn, and you can rotate them each turn. Also, occasionally you will notice grass spots jiggling. If you step onto them, you will encounter a foe that may be rare or offer more XP than usual. There are also more Wi-Fi options through a new menu interface called Seed Gear, the most notable of which is called Game Sync. With this, you can connect the Pokemon to Global Link and send one of your Pokemon to the Dream World. You then go online and access a mini-game where you have a house and a berry patch inside the Dream World, kind of like a Farmville mini-game. You can catch Pokemon there that have unique abilities that they normally wouldn't have as well, and transfer them over to your game. This game, in my opinion, is the best so far feature-wise. Also being the newest of the games, it is the most popular in terms of online trading and battling. It also has the best story by far, filled with very interesting characters. Now I recommend you get the White version. Even though Zekrom, White's mascot, isn't as strong as Reshiram, the endgame of White is better because of a unique place. In Black, players can go to this place called Black City after beating the game. This is a city that the player can sort of raise and develop, gaining access to shops and trainers to battle. But White has a place called White Forest, which has Pokemon from previous games that can be captured and trained. This, in my opinion, makes it the title to choose. Of course, if you already own those previous games and transfer them via PAL Park and Gen 4 and Poké Transfer them up into this game, well then go for Black. But I actually have both, so I guess that's really the way to go. So what really makes these games great? The fact that there is so much to do after you beat them. First off, there's your Pokedex. Usually after beating the game, you get access to an upgrade called the National Dex. This lets you add information of Pokemon from prior games. Platinum, Diamond, and Pearl require you to finish the Sinnoh before you can upgrade it, which kind of sucks. Black, they just give it to you. So if you're a collector type, you can then try to fill out your Pokedex by collecting them all. As the catchphrase goes, gotta catch 'em all. Obviously, this is tough to do, as there are 649 Pokemon currently. To aid in completing your dex, you can hop on the Global Trade System, or GTS for short. Then there's breeding, which is surprisingly complex. You see, every time you encounter a Pokemon, it's unique in a few ways. First, there's its nature, of which there are 25 types. 5 of them don't do anything. The other 20 each affect how a Pokemon's stats increases as it levels up. Each nature raises one while lowering the other. For example, if you have a modest Pokemon, it will gain extra points in its special attack, while losing points in its attack stat. You can see the nature of a Pokemon on its status screen, but the thing that makes them really unique cannot be seen anywhere in-game. They are called individual values. You have to use a calculator online to check them out. Basically, every stat can have a hidden modifier that ranges between 0 and 31. So let's use the Pokemon Absol as an example. If you have a quirky, nature-based Absol, quirky, by the way, is a balanced nature, doesn't add or subtract anything, and it has an IV of 31 for its HP stat, then its health would be 271 at level 100. If it had 0 IVs for its HP, it would only have 240, so that's a difference of 31 HP. You can somewhat control the IVs of the Pokemon through meticulous breeding, however. You can also breed a Pokemon to have moves its species wouldn't normally have through interbreeding with other Pokemon it's compatible with. Like I said, it gets pretty complex because you also have to take into account the sex of the Pokemon. I mean, the sex affects the moves that pass down and the type of Pokemon that hatches. It's always the type that hatches always matches the female, but it's the male that passes down TM and HM moves, so it's pretty complex. After that, there's EV or effort value training. Every time your Pokemon defeats another, it gets a certain amount of EV points in a certain stat. 4 EVs equal a 1-point increase, up to a maximum of 63 points per stat. A Pokemon can only get a total of 510 EVs, which means it could raise 2 stats by 63 and another stat by 1. Or you could spread out the points however you see fit. So to train specific stats, you have to bring your freshly caught or hatched Pokemon and have them fight specific enemies and manually track the points they gain, because like IVs, these stats are not shown anywhere directly in the game. Using the 31 point HP Absol example, if you were to EV train its HP stat, it would jump from having 271 to having 334. All of these activities really only lead to one purpose: competitive battling. This can be done with a friend who's next to you, or with a random matchup with anyone around the world via online. You can record matches using the Versus Recorder for bragging rights, and there are even national tournaments you can enter for prizes. All in all, this is a huge series that is not just for kids. In fact, most little kids probably couldn't understand the complexity of breeding and IVs and EVs, etc., 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 and will get creamed in online matches. So yeah, this is an awesome series that I highly recommend. Just be forewarned, it's very addictive, and these reviews don't nearly cover everything the games have to offer.